Welcome to our programming for the Campaign for Equal Dignity. I'm Jill Savitt, the CEO and President of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. The Campaign for Equal Dignity is where the center takes up issues of race and justice in conversations, book talks, our film festival, and with weekly email recommendations on how you can engage on human rights issues. You can watch any of our past programs and see what's coming up at equaldignity.org. We are pleased to announce that the center has reopened. If you'd like to come by and get inspired by the courageous stories from civil rights history or the contemporary struggle for human rights around the world, please come. You'll need to purchase tickets online and sign up for a time slot for your visit. We're open Thursdays to Sundays, and we ask that you read our safety information online before you visit. Information on all of this is available at our website, civilandhumanrights.org. For our program today, we are delighted to have with us a longtime friend of the center, Arthur M. Blank. Mr. Blank is the owner and chairman of the Blank family of businesses. He is, of course, the co-founder of the Home Depot, and the Blank family of businesses include the Atlanta Falcons and Atlanta United, the PGA Tour Superstore, and ranches in Montana, as well as Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Here at the center, we work with the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. Mr. Blank and the foundation have been champions for the center for more than a decade, before we even had a building, when we were just an idea, and they have provided us with financial and moral support and good counsel ever since. We are here today to talk with Arthur Blank about his new book called Good Company. It's a combination memoir, leadership manual, and discussion about how to live and work with purpose. We are delighted to be able to have him with us today to talk about the intersection of human rights with a range of issues the book raises. Mr. Arthur Blank, welcome to the Campaign for Equal Dignity.
Jill, thank you very much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend a little time with you and all your viewers. It's great.
Great. Thank you. So before we jump into the book, and this is raised in the book itself, I want to just take your temperature about how you're viewing our world right now. We've got pandemic, racial injustice, protests, unpredictable economy, a watershed election, and all of this against a backdrop of, the most partisan time in my lifetime. So as you look at the state of our country, what are you thinking? What's your frame of mind?
My frame of mind is that I think we have a fever, and in all those areas. And I think it's interesting. We wrote this book, started to write it probably 4 years ago, and it's almost perfect for these times. We didn't know these times that you just described would be upon us in 2020, but the book talks about a set of values that drive all of our behavior, and they have to do with our fans, guests, and customers, and our associates, and the communities that we're active in. So, I think that to me, what's been grounding to me is all of our decision making relative to all of our businesses and our involvement with the community, because of all the things you mentioned, is really based on these values. And the values, they're not driven by numbers. They're not driven by financial relationships and things of that nature. They're driven on behavior and living life with purpose, and making sure that we do, making sure our associates do, making sure the fans, guests, customers we have in our variety of businesses all feel that. They feel our heart, et cetera. They feel us being part of them. That connection is there. It's a real connection. And so I think in difficult times, you lean heavily on the pillars in your life, the pillars in your makeup and your spirit that really drive your behavior. And that's what we've been doing. And that's why this book is so beautiful right now. It's not a matter of selling books. It's a matter of really just trying to understand that there's a different perspective, a different way to look at how to run any institution, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, both. It's not one versus another. The beauty of this is that, it applies to a football team, a soccer team. It applies to the largest chain of golf specialty stores in America, to the largest landowner in Paradise Valley with several guest ranches, and obviously the foundation work as well. So,
the values really are human rights values. Human rights values are based on the inherent worth and dignity of every human being.
Right, right.
And that struck me.
Yeah, well, because it starts with that. I mean, if you want to be connected to the people you're serving, or have the people that are in your employ, have them, your associates, how they feel, how they're connected to you and to the people that they're serving directly. You have to do that through heart and mind and spirit. It's not done through a transaction. It's built on relationships. It's built on trust. And I have this philosophy that what the world needs now to deal with a lot of the issues that you're describing, it doesn't need more connection. We have plenty of connection now in terms of technology. What we don't have is neighborhoods, and neighborhoods in a broad sense that people live together, they work together, they support each other, they find ways to help out times of stress or duress in anybody else's life. And so I think as a community, Atlanta, cities all over the state, throughout the nation, we got to think about more. How do we connect to humanity? How do we connect to each other? How do we have a purpose in our lives that goes beyond, that transcends just who we are and maybe who our immediate family is, which is terribly important, critical, but goes into the broader sense of, how do we take responsibility for the opportunities we have in life? People, Jill, often say, well, they ask the question theoretically of life, like, why am I here? And what's my purpose and what have you? We talk about that in the book, and there's been some great books written about that. Victor Frankl, the search for
Man's Search for Meaning.
Search for meaning. But part of that is the flip side of that. The flip side of that is that life also asks us. If I've given you an opportunity, to live a life. So what are you going to do with your life? It's not just a question of how your life's going to serve others, but you got to ask yourself, where's my responsibility to make the world a better place? And I think every human being has that responsibility and has that opportunity.
Yeah. So a lot of the book, and the title of the book, is about what it means for someone who leads a company or is a senior leader of a company to balance profitability with
Right.
social responsibility, this corporate social responsibility. And, you don't have to look too far to see that not every company does that, and that some of them are still succeeding financially.
Right.
So they're not really moved to change. What needs to happen to encourage his business to incorporate a more values-based approach?
Well, if I remember correctly, Jill, you went to Yale University.
Yes.
Is that correct? So
that is correct.
There's a woman there, Dr. Laurie Santos, who you're probably familiar with her work.
Yeah.
And she began to offer this course to students at Yale, what makes people happy, and because kids were asking about that. Started out, there were 30 kids first year, 200, 300 after that. They now have 14 to 1,500 students signing up for that class at Yale University. And they don't have a building big enough on campus. The university is 205 years old, as you know. So they had to move it off campus, and she's also doing it online. So the reason I'm making note of that is that because our younger populations, our millennials, our younger populations, thank heavens, are asking the bigger questions and are pressing for answers. They're not satisfied with what they see around them. They're not satisfied with our country the way it is today for the reasons you described, and we could discuss that. But they're certainly not satisfied with what they see across the world. And so I think individuals, young people primarily, are looking for purpose, are looking for much more of a meaning. So I think they're pressing, companies today, why am I here? Why am I here with your company? Why should I be here? Why should I devote my life, my working hours, which are a big part of my life, to your organization, this organization? And so I think that, young folks today, much more than less, are seeking organizations that have a set of values that speak to not just bottom line, because it's important. Capitalism is important, and you have to sustain an organization over a period of time. You have to make money, et cetera. But there's a whole nother set of values: how you live in your community, how you treat your associates, how you treat the people that you're serving, whether it be guests, fans, or customers, or whatever they may be. And so I think they recognize the importance of that. When they go home at night today, I think young people, they want to feel good about, their work all day. They want to feel good about what they've done and who they've done it with. They want to tell stories to their family about how they made a difference in somebody else's life today. And so I salute that. And, as you know, the Business Roundtable, which consists of 192 of the biggest corporations today in America, since they were founded, which was almost 50 years ago, they had a core philosophy which says our job as corporations, major U.S. corporations, is to give a return to our stakeholders, return to our shareholders, et cetera. That was our job. 2 years ago, one of my very close friends is Jamie Dimon, who's the chairman CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He chairs that organization. And they changed their philosophy to say, yes, those things are important. Profitability, because we can't sustain ourselves without profitability. But the planet's important, and people are important, who are serving important, and our associates are important. So they put an equal weight on those things today. And so that's a recognition by major corporations in America that they're on a journey. Now, they're not all there, but they're getting there. And so I'm personally encouraged by that.
Yeah, I mean, that letter came out just about a year ago.
Yeah, it was June, I think, June of
Yeah.
2019.
And, I think it got criticized by some in the corporate social responsibility field that is this just lip service? Do you think there has been a shift, or is a year too soon to tell?
No, I think, it's like a lot of things, particularly that, as you well know, Jill, and our museum speaks to that there's been changes and improvements and things are better over time, but they're not where they need to be. I would say the same thing in that journey. The first part of the journey, in any journey, is to acknowledge where you are and acknowledge the issue or the problem or the opportunity in front of you. In this case, they acknowledge the opportunity and the problem that they have. And so, it's 192 different organizations that all have their own pulse and their own, heartbeat. So they'll progress through that, through that lens over some period of time. But I know that they're going to be pushed, whether it be selfishly, because, frankly, young people coming out of schools today are going to be saying, hey, I've got some bigger questions here beyond your bottom line. And I know I got to make a living. I understand all of that, but why am I here? I mean, what does your company do? How are they involved with the environment? How are they involved with the communities? How are they involved with humanity? Do you give back to the communities? Is that an afterthought, or is that woven into your DNA? So I think it's a journey that most of those companies, if not all, are on. Some will get there sooner than others. Some, like JP Morgan Chase, is already there. Well, they're there because you have a leader like Jamie Dimon, who's an old friend and talked about in the book. I tried to recruit Jamie to run Home Depot when I left.
I read that. That was interesting.
I almost did it. We got real close. It was 6 months of, eating at our house and jogging with him every morning and taking him to his favorite place for lunch and all that kind of stuff. And he's a wonderful leader.
But he couldn't switch to retail, he said.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
But his mind, he understood our values. I mean, that was the key thing, is that book that I'm publishing next week, officially published, Good Company, he really could have written it. And so for JP Morgan Chase, which was an institution that huge and was foreign to a lot of those things, he's moved that needle tremendously there. Right. So it's not only incredibly successful, largest commercial bank in the world, institution in the world, but also, they live values there every day that both you and I would be very proud of.
Yeah, I think for a lot of companies, they think it's about how they give away their money and how they do philanthropy, but it's also about how you make your money.
Yeah, well, it's about how you make your money and how do you, it's about building trust relationships with your partners. So your partners are not just suppliers, but every institution could be bankers, could be suppliers, it could be service suppliers. It's about trust you develop with who you're serving, whether it be in the manufacturing business, the retail business, the service business, et cetera. You're running an institution there. So when people come in to the museum, it's a trust factor that when they come in, and if they want, to get a tour around, et cetera, they're going to have somebody who's going to actually be knowledgeable, be thoughtful, be sensitive to the issues that are on display and there to be discussed, et cetera. So they have a great relationship with the museum. They come back, they bring family, they bring friends, et cetera. If it just is a museum with things showing and there's no really connecting to them, they don't come back as often.
Yeah. So a lot of folks who watch this show are, they work in NGOs, they work in the nonprofit field.
Yeah.
So a curbside consult for us. Is the business advice you give in good company, do you think it also is applicable to NGOs who are dealing in an environment of such rapid change and enormous need?
Yeah, well, I think certainly in our case of our foundation, it is. I mean, the majority of the work that we do across a broad group of programming is really over a longer term. It's a longer term kind of, systemic fixes for things that we care deeply about. On the other hand, when you have what you described, this pandemic, you have crises from an economic standpoint, from a food standpoint, from a medical care standpoint. I mean, the list goes on and on. You have all these people that are really at the brink of their lives in many cases. You have to fix that. You have to fix that. You have to, there's a house on fire. The last thing you're going to ask, well, how is it built? And could we have avoided that? First thing we got to do is put out the fire. Right. So we've spent tremendous amount of resources, financial and otherwise. All of our integrity, all of our personnel are devoted to, trying to make a difference. So I'll give you an example. It's not related to the pandemic, but it's related to issues that I know near and dear to your heart, and that's the election coming up. So, we don't ask people to, to make a choice. I mean, Republican, Democrat, that's their choice, whatever it may be. But we've worked hard on voting rights and making sure that people register and they get out and vote. Whoever they vote for, they vote for. And that's true in Atlanta, it's true in Georgia, it's true in Montana where we have our ranches. And now we have these PGA Tour superstores in half the major markets in the United States. All of them are going to be used to encourage people to register and vote. So, there's ways that you can, give back. It's not just about always writing checks. It's about demonstrating behavior that supports a set of values that I think are important for our country today.
Yeah, our mission, we believe at the center, is really about promoting democratic practice, the practice of democracy, because that's rights are based on that. You can't have rights protected if you don't have a foundation where you can petition your government to change things. So, and voting is the most critical. A lot of our programming is focused on that. I want to pivot a little bit. You talk a lot in the book about listening and the importance of listening and then responding based on what you hear. The movement for racial justice has raised all kinds of uncomfortable truths that people need to hear, and we're finding that people are resistant. In that act of listening, what do you recommend to people when they are going to hear something that is uncomfortable, but we've got to hear it if we're going to get to the solution?
Well, I think when you're dealing with any problem in your life, whether it's a personal problem, yourself or within your family, or you deal with a community problem, a societal problem, you have to take time to really fully understand really what the issues are. So I'll give you a practical example. When we built our stadium, which was opened up in August of 2017, when we started construction on about 4 years prior to that, probably the years 4 through 7 prior to the opening of the stadium, we probably held or participated in 300 neighborhood meetings on the West Side. And we went, and really all we said basically was that, we're here to learn, we're here to listen. So we don't have a prepared speech for you. We're not going to show you a bunch of models. What we want to understand is that, tell us what we can do as your partners in this neighborhood to make this situation better for you than it currently is. And because, English Avenue in Vine City in the 50s and 60s was one of the great middle-class areas in Atlanta. And when we opened up, or before we opened up, it was about 1/10 of what it was in terms of size, unlike the rest of Atlanta, which has grown from 1 million to close to 7 million since I've moved here. And what we heard was that, we need to focus on health, we need to focus on jobs, we need to focus on schools, public education. Our kids need to be safe when they come home from schools and we're out working, et cetera. Where can they go to, to exercise their mind and their body? So, we didn't come in with any ideas. We just came in with a neutral slate saying, what are we going to hear? And then we hear enough of one thing. So those are the things that we focused on. We kept hearing the same things over a period of 2 or 3 years. and different people in our organization did the listening. It wasn't just one person who may have a certain filter. Everybody was listening. Myself, Penny McPhee, the president of the foundation, Rich McKay, the president of our team. We had a number of people out. John Bear was one of our senior vice presidents in the foundation. So we had all these people out that were listening. And just tell us what you want. Tell us what your needs are. Don't tell us everything, but give us like 1 through 5 in priority order. So we want to know what are the major things first. And so when we got launched with our community work on the West Side, now along with a lot of others, who's the West Side Future Fund and other programs, we were responding to real needs, not ones that were made up on our own mind.
Yeah, no, I think that skill of listening is going to come into play a lot these days.
Well, it's the same, Jill. You're running a magnificent museum. It's fabulous. But I would say to you, if you said to me, "Well, we don't have enough traffic in here," well, Jill, okay, you can just go out and find out. There's 7 million people living in Atlanta. You already have whatever percentage of them are coming to visit the museum. This is what we did when we first bought the Atlanta Falcons. We had the lowest percentage of in-stadium attendance of any team in the NFL. There were only 31 teams competed then, and the commissioner then, Paul Tagliabue, did a forced ranking, and we were ranked 37. He said, if we actually had other teams in here, you'd be 37 on that list. So what we did is that we just, I spent time in the marketplace not asking our season ticket holders, asking the other, whatever the right number was, and 5.5 million people at that time, whatever it was, why don't you come? I mean, just tell us, why don't you come? And people, if they really feel your humility, and if they really feel you have an interest in their answers, truly, not just like a lip service kind of thing, they really feel that they'll say, oh, you're really interested? Okay, well, I'll tell you. So they gave us like 5 things. It wasn't 50 things, it was 5 things. We solved for those 5 things. And from the first game on, ever since, in 19 years, this year is my 19th year as an owner, we've sold out every single game, other than 3 games in 2007 when Michael Vick broke his leg. So, I mean, people will tell you, if they really feel you want to know, they'll tell you what you have to do to get better.
Yeah.
At HD, Bernie and I would stand outside of our stores when we only had a handful of stores, and we would stop every customer. We would thank every customer who bought anything, but we would stop the ones that came through and didn't have anything. And we'd say, thank you for coming today. We appreciate it. But my guess is you came here for something, for an answer to something or a product or a solution, but you didn't walk out with it. So tell me, what could we do better for you? And they would tell you, say, well, you're out of stock, or you had the wrong manufacturer, or you had the price wasn't right, or someone on the sales floor actually didn't know what they were talking about, which was like, to us was like a horrible thing. But really, I mean, and people tell you that. They'll tell you, you want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. And so we would respond to those things. It's the listen and respond. And it takes, I think, an inner sense of humility, of not knowing it all, knowing who you're serving always knows better than what we know. They truly do. They always know better than we do. If you want to get better, ask them. They're the yellow brick road, to your success.
It's so interesting because people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and learn the answer to those questions.
They learn the answer. They hire consultants who basically go out and do the same thing, except when you hear it yourself, and that's the advantage that in the case of HD, using that as an example, or really in case of anything, when I'd go out and walk around and talk to people who weren't coming in the building for Falcon games, I'd ask them why. And they, hearing the words from them said, well, the prices are just too high, or there's no parking downtown, or the food is priced too high. I mean, they would tell you sincerely. Well, I said, thank you for sharing that with us. Give us an opportunity to fix it. Yeah. And people at their core, they want to do good things. They want to help others. They want to be part of a community of other people that feel the same way.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. I saw that Falcons fans won't be able to come this Sunday.
Right.
The pandemic, after just reading in the book about how that was the main strategy, was get people.
Well, but see, there's a really good example, if I can, Jill. So we help write the law for the state in terms of how many people could fit into a building like that, based on CDC protocols. So we could fit in 17,500 people. into that building today and be safe. However, given when we had to make the decision, we weren't comfortable where the numbers were in Atlanta and in Georgia, just generally. And I know that going in the right direction, thank heavens, hopefully we'll continue to go in that direction. And we may make a different set of decisions going forward, depending on where the numbers are. But at that time, we had to make a decision. So it wasn't about, and we knew we could keep, probably our associates probably clean. We could probably keep, but we knew that, fans come in the building, required to wear masks, required to do a number of different things, but whether or not they would keeping masks on during that period of time was questionable. And the issue to us is that, do we really want to be part of the problem for the community? Do we really want to create an environment that it could become a hotspot where it was spreading that virus out? It's the same reason, same decision tree we followed in closing our ranches in Montana. One of the ranches is open to the public, has been open to the public for over 100 years. We closed it this summer. And we closed the adjoining ranch, which we use for, basically nonprofit work, think tank work, conference work, et cetera. We try to, bring disruptors in to try to think about how the world should be, et cetera. We closed them both. The local county officials, they said, listen, you're following every protocol. You've got everything you need, have it say, et cetera. You will end up with some disease on this because 70% of your associates come from out of state. Most of your guests come from out of state. And so our decision, it was a sad one for me, but it was an easy one for me based on the values I talk about in the book. We got to protect the communities. We're here for a long time, been here for 100 years. We want to be here another 100 years. We don't want the communities to look at us as saying, these foreigners from Atlanta, Georgia, they brought disease into Montana, into Paradise Valley. So, those decisions become easier to make when they're based on core values that you fundamentally believe in.
Yeah. So my last question for you is something interesting I learned about you reading the book is that your mother was a human rights activist.
Yes, my mother was.
Social justice warrior.
There's a funny story in the book, which I don't have the time to tell you all, but it's probably a good reason to buy the book too. But we were robbed once when I was about 10 years old. We were living in a one-bedroom apartment. My father was a pharmacist. He was still alive. He passed away when he was 44. I was 15 at that time. But the robbers came in, they knocked him down and said, well, where's the money? They thought he was the owner of the drugstore, really was his brother, had the same last name, Blank. And so they went to the whole house, and one robber sat in the living room with myself and my brother and I, and my mother had a gun on his lap. And he's telling us, this, that, and the other thing. And my mother was giving him a lecture about why what he was doing was wrong. And it's not what, it's not what he's raised for. It's not what his parents would want him to do. I mean, that he can find something else to do with the rest of his life. This is not going to lead to a good place. I mean, the man's sitting there with a gun, and, my mother's giving him a lecture about, how he should live his life. And, instead of just saying, look, just be quiet, everybody, everything will be okay. They'll be gone in a few minutes. That's the nature of who she was.
Yeah. I mean, it's the principle of the thing is her mantra.
That's exactly right. And she believed that. And, she would say that over so many things that most people would say, that's not important. It's unimportant. She would always say it's the principle of the thing. And principle matters because when you start to compromise principle on small things, you end up compromising principle on bigger things. And so,
well, that's human rights. So that's a fitting place to end.
Yes,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you for your leadership at the museum. And we've had many opportunities to be supportive in the past, and we'll look forward to doing that in the future.
And I'm sorry, I should have said this at the top. The proceeds of this book are coming directly to support the center. Thank you so much for that. And to everyone listening, buy the book.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But it's I'm looking forward to coming and visiting again. And it's such a beautiful diamond jewel in Atlanta that we're lucky to have it here. And I'm sure if Dr. King was alive today, he'd be walking that museum with his chest out and shoulders back, feeling very, very proud. And I know that John Lewis felt that way. I know that Andy Young feels that way. And we were honored to host our party during the Super Bowl when we could have hosted any place in the greater city of Atlanta. And we picked the museum And we still have owners
There's a
today.
great story behind how you had the
Yeah.
owners come in before they could sit down and eat.
They had to walk through a part of the museum, and you know, it was interesting. I've had owners, and I know I'm running over, but it's worthwhile. I've had owners who've been in the league, families who've been in the league for 50, 60, 70 years. The league is about 100 years old now, a little over 100 years old, 101 year old, who said that was the most meaningful owners party that they've ever attended. It wasn't just like great food and a great atmosphere, but it had meaning to it, had purpose to it. And having it in your museum was a magnificent thing for us. And in fact, we had John Legend there that night, who performed beautifully, and it was just a wonderful night from a lot of standpoints. We had Michael Vick was the MC that night. Great story of redemption. He rehearsed for six. He
So
rehearsed
much
for
I wanted
6
to
hours
ask
that
you
day. I
about.
mean, it was like so funny. So.
Yeah, so you'll have to come back and talk with us again, because there's a lot we didn't get to.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it. And thank you again for your leadership. And I look forward to seeing you.
So much. And for our viewers, please join us at equaldignity.org. You can find out about our upcoming programs and check out the actions you can take to get engaged. Thank you so much for joining us today.